Good evening, everyone. We continue on Job's defense of himself. He had spent a chapter discussing how he was before all the calamity befell him. And then he spent one chapter discussing what has really happened. Now, in chapter 31, we come to the point where he is trying to figure out why is this happening to him. That was the very question he had tried to answer, and his friends insisted and keep insisting that he must have sinned gravely. And he also defended himself by saying that he didn't. And so let's see what he has to say in chapter 31. And he begins this: I have made a covenant with my eyes. How then could I look at a virgin? So let me just break this down a little bit. Remember, Job is a blameless person, upright, fears God, shuns evil. Now, this aspect here is shunning evil. What really he means is this. First of all, understand that even in the ancient times, adultery is an evil, right? It's seen as an evil, it's punishable even before the law. But in this particular case, he demonstrates to us that he makes a covenant. It's like making a treaty with an enemy. He sees his eyes as something that could lead him to doing something evil. And so he says, how could I look at a virgin? Now, this word here is betula. It is marriageable. And so he's saying that he doesn't want to allow himself to, well, I guess you could say that this is the idea here is look, is concentrated gazing, such that he would be, how should we, infatuated with the young girl, and then may lead him to marry her. Now, understand this is not adultery, because he can marry if the girl is not married. But he has gone one step further. That one, it implies that he is not doing it with a married woman, and Isha, and he is also stopping himself from doing it with a Betula, which is translated here as a virgin. So he is saying that I have gone that far to prevent myself to shun evil. And so, what is the portion of God from above, or the inheritance of Shaddai from on high? So, what is my portion? Now, what does this mean? Now, understand the age old understanding is you do good, blessings. You do evil, punishment. Now, that's basically how the ancients and even Job would think. So it says, I have been doing good. I have, if I've prevented myself from being lured by my eyes. And then he says, so what then am I getting? Right? That's how he's saying, what am I getting? I'm not a criminal. So in verse 3, he says, is it not disaster to the criminal? And I think this idea of disaster, it is a calamity, right? A calamity. This word is aid, aid, and it is seen as a misfortune. These things actually will happen if You are an, well, I guess this word is aval. That it's not really a criminal. This word here really means unjust. If somebody is unjust, he could, right? He is perverse. He could. But Job is saying, I'm not like that. This is a misfortune to those who practice injustice. So now we have an A and a B. He says, this is really what we are saying. If you are doing evil, you will be punished. But I am not evil. And so he asks in verse 4, does he not see my ways, what I have decided? Does he not count all my steps? And so he is saying, I am innocent. Does God not see? And this is his actual problem that he is seeing. He is innocent. He is suffering the misfortune. Does God not see? This is this is punishment for evil. But I expect a blessing for doing good. I do not expect punishment for good. And so if that is the case, then God is not punishing me. Then what is happening? Now, this is up to verse 4. In verse 5, he says, if I had walked with deception and my foot hurried after deceit, then let him weigh me with accurate scales and let God know my integrity. So these two verses have to be read together. Now, first of all, this word deception is a very well, I would say a more unusual word. And this word is shava, right? It's right here. Shava. It is actually vanity. If I had walked in a vain way, if my conduct is worthless, that is what he's saying. If my conduct is worthless and my foot have hurried after deceit, or this one is treachery. Now, treachery means it looks good, right? It appears good, but much of everything is done under the covers. And this is evil. So this is seen as good, but in actual fact, it is evil. This is known as treachery. Now, this is a very important word because you'll keep seeing it in the book of Jeremiah. So treachery means you see it as good, but in actual fact, it is evil. So this is deception. It is worthless conduct. You see it as a worthless conduct, or you might want to see it as fraud. So verse 6 says, let him weigh me in the balances of justice. So you can say scales of justice. And so this implies that God is looking at justice, and this is really very much a symbol, right? The symbol of justice is a pair of scales. So for whatever you have done with the law of justice, which is God's law, and they are all natural laws. And if you have done treachery, then you will be punished. If you have not, then God should know my integrity. Now, this is a good word. Integrity means innocence. He is that bold to say that, well, if that's the case, let God weigh me in the scales of justice. He should know my innocence. And so it is a continued defense, right? It's a continued defense of his own innocence. Verse 7, if my step has turned from the way, or my heart followed my eyes, or if any spot has stuck to my hands, let me sow and eat another, or another eat, and let my crops be uprooted. Now, hereby begins a rhetorical. If he is guilty, then he should be punished. And in a few of this imagery and poetic way, he expresses this concept. So if my step, my heart, my hands, my eyes. So notice my eyes, as in verse 1. If his eyes lead him to do something else, then he made the decision, fine. So this one is, if I am guilty, then he says, I can sow and somebody else can eat. That's basically what it says. Let my crops be uprooted as a punishment. Then we have another one here. If my heart has been enticed by a woman, and this word here is a married woman, and this would be adultery. Or I have looked at my neighbor's doorway. This is with regards to the married woman. And then he says this, if that is the case, then it is fair that my wife grind grain for another and let others kneel down over her. This is a euphemism that it happens to her. And Job will have nothing to say. And so this is a poetic expression, understand this, that if he actually did all this, then if it happened to his wife, then he's got nothing to say because he did the same. That's the defense that he is making. Verse 11, for that it would be a lustful crime, moreover, it would be wrongdoing, punishable by judges. Now, although we had seen that in verse 11, he is saying that not only is wrong and immoral, this is wrong, this is immoral. He's saying, I did not do this. For it would be fire that consumes to Abaddon and would uproot all my increases. This is destruction. Remember, evil is seen to be punished. And so if he did all this, yes. Now, his idea is saying, but I did not. So why is this happening? Not only defend his own integrity of protecting the weak, verse 13, if I have rejected the claim of my male or female slaves when they file a complaint against me, now this is verse 13, and he is saying he did not, right? He did not deny justice. This is so important. He's not just defending himself, but he did not deny justice for his workers. If they had a case, he would let them file it. If they have a complaint, he would allow them to seek justice. So then what could I do when God arises? When he calls me to account, how am I to answer him? Now, these words might have been worded slightly differently, but the intent is to say that I am answerable to God. And I must do everything right so that I can answer God. That's how he is phrasing all this. Verse 15, did he who made me in the womb not make him? Who is him? Him would be these people. The man who would complain, the man who is not like him. And the same one created us in the womb. So in Job's mind, it is God who made Job, who is great man. God also made others not so great. And in Job's mind, he's seeing we are equal. That is Job's mind. If I have kept the poor from their desire. Now, this is well, in this case, I don't think it is. This is desire, about the poor desire for food, for needs. Okay, that would be the idea. This is not about enjoyment or have caused the eyes of the widow to fail. Now, verse 16, this idea of fail literally means to end, right? To end, to be wasted, to be exhausted. Now, what this means is the poor here is the focus. The widow is the focus. And we're talking about tzedakah, or what is commonly translated as righteousness. Tzedakah. It's translated as righteousness in the most case. But I think rightness is a better word. Rightness by God. And God expects Job to take care of those in need. And so Job is saying, I have not held back. I have not kept the poor from their desire of needs. I have not caused the eyes of the widow to be exhausted, that she would think that there is no help for her. Nor have I eaten my morsel alone. Verse 17. I did not eat the bread in solitude. Meaning I eat and I ignore everybody. And the orphan has not shared it. Now, this idea here is the orphan cannot this word is not a good way. So let me see how to translate this. He says, so that the orphan could not eat it. So what it shows is that Job is not eating alone, preventing the orphan who has no father. Obviously, this word is not, well, I would say fatherless would be a better word. In the Bible, we are always told to look after the poor, the widow who has no man, the fatherless who has no father, and these are people with no man to defend them. And Job is saying, I have never eaten in solitude, ignoring the orphan. right? Ignoring the orphan. But from my youth, he grew up with me as with a father, and from my infancy, I guided her. The 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 idea that Job is saying is, I practice this. I practice this from my mother's womb. Now, where do you see this? Now, the word here, from my infancy, I guided her. Uh, this word, my infancy, is my mother's womb, right? And this idea is, I guided her as in the idea of making sure that the orphan is taken care of. And so he is there to defend the orphan. He says, if I have seen anyone perish for lack of clothing, or that the needy had no covering. Now, verse 19 is an extension. Said, if I have seen somebody that has nothing to wear, or somebody who is destitute, that he has no clothing. And he's now continuing on in verse 20 to say, what did he do? If his ways has not thanked me, would not bless me, or if he had been warmed with the fleece of my sheep, if I ever lifted my hand against the fatherless, because I saw that I had support in the gate, may my shoulder does fall from its socket and my arm be broken off at the elbow. Now, what does all this mean? It means that Job is very careful to treat the fatherless in a right way. So the orphan will thank, and he's been warmed by the fleece. That's how he's taken care of the orphans. If I've lifted up my hand against the orphan or the fatherless, now this would be the right discipline, because he would have support at the gate among the judges, that legally he is right. And he's saying, if I actually did this, may my shoulder fall from its socket. You know, this is an Oriental way of saying, if I struck you, will let my arm come off my hand, right? If Job did hurt a fatherless, then may this be his punishment. Uh, that would be the way it's understood. In verse 23, 23 says, for the misfortune from God is a terror to me. Now, this is misfortune. What he is experiencing now is a disaster. And if it's from God, then it is a fear to me. He's terrified. If he had done all the good and right things in life, why is this happening? He says, I cannot do anything from the disaster of God, and I'm not able to. Okay, this is a challenging word. I cannot bear his majesty, his loftiness, his weight. I cannot bear. And so Job is admitting what is happening is too great for him. And this we have seen since chapter 3, verse 24. Now, he is now saying, what about his trust? If I put my confidence in gold, now this word confidence, this is an idea of hope or confidence, right? If I put my hope or confidence in gold and I trust or have confidence, this is the word. This word, trust, my trust, my confidence. This is an A, this is a B. Now, this word, my trust, would be trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. That's Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5. Same word. If I trust in gold, if I put confidence in gold, if I have gloated because my wealth was great, if he has great wealth, remember we discussed this in chapter 1, he was extremely rich. And because my hand had obtained so much. So this is now going on to a different aspect, saying that first, I have done all the right things, and yet I am suffering from injustice. It's too great for me. If I trust in gold, if I trust in wealth, that would be a problem. If I look at the sun when it shone or the moon going in splendor, now what does that mean? Now, verse 26 and 27 really talks about idolatry. Because he fears God. So he doesn't look at the sun, he doesn't look at the moon as his God. He has no idolatry. He really fears God. So, what seems to be the problem? If my heart was secretly enticed, my hand threw a kiss from my mouth in a symbol of affection to idols, the sun, the moon, whatever that may be, that too would have been a guilty deed requiring judgment, for I would have denied God above. He sees all these little actions as very serious. He's now putting his own loyalty to God in question. If I have done this, even if my heart had been enticed, if I use my hand to throw a kiss from my mouth, that would be verse 27. My hand pressed against my lips like a flying kiss kind of thing, that I would be guilty to be judged. For I will have denied the God above. Now, 28 says this. The idea of deny is to act deceptively. He had lied about God, right? And this would be a way of saying things that I have denied God above would be a good way of expressing this. In verse 29, then he asks this question. It's not have I, but if I, because this word is if. If I rejoice at the misfortune of my enemy or become excited when evil found him. When bad things happen to my enemy, In verse 30, it says, no, I did not allow my mouth to sin by asking for his life in a curse. In his lips did not sin. We keep seeing this about Job. His lips did not sin. Even when bad things happened to his enemies, he did not add any salt to the wound. He did not utter words that increases the damnation of his enemies. Right? This is a very important aspect for us to understand that he's defending his own integrity here. Verse 31. 31, understand this is not have but if, right? It's im. If the people of my tent did not say, who have not been satisfied with his flesh. Now, all of this is about the enemy. And he has not asked for the pound of flesh from the enemy. He did not add to the problems of the enemy. Verse 32. No stranger has not spent the night outside, for I have opened my doors to the traveler on the street. Actually, verse 32 talks about I've opened my doors to the path or people traveling. So what do you think he has done? He actually has opened his tent to travelers who are strangers because they are in need. And so he has shown that I've done all these things. Verse 33. If I covered my wrongdoings like a man by hiding my guilt in my shirt pocket. Now, this is not, this is a translation. In the bosom, right? My shirt pocket, in my bosom would be a better way. It is reminiscent of Genesis chapter 3, where the man says, did you eat? When God asked him, he says, no, the woman that you made for me, she made me eat this. And so this is in a way hiding my guilt. And so Job is saying, I don't hide like other people. If I had done wrong, I will make sure that I am clear that I have done wrong. I don't need to hide. Now that is reminiscing Genesis chapter 3, verse 34. It says, for I feared the great multitude, and the contempt of families terrified me. I kept silent and did not go out of doors. Now, these words are said about his current predicament. His current predicament. What would that be? He says, I feared the great multitude. Now, I think this would be not a very good way of expressing. The word feared should be understood as strike fear in the great multitude. Not I feared, but I strike fear in the great multitude. Remember, in chapter 30 and 29 particularly, is describing the life before the calamity, that wherever he goes, he walks, people are afraid of him because he is so righteous. He does things that is so right. and the people will always compare themselves to him, and they would be afraid of him. Now that would be I strike fear in the great multitude. The second phrase here is but, right? But now the most contemptible, the contempt of is not the contempt of families, the most contempt families terrifies me. So this is a better way. Puts fear in Job. So the role is reversed. Why? Because in the past he could strut around with righteousness, but now his righteousness is demonstrated, at least in part, by showing that he is struck with awful calamities, which everybody seems to think that he must have done something grievously wrong. And so the people out there would be questioning, what did Job do to deserve all these things? And so what is he doing now? I keep my silence. So I am silenced. And I am unable, right? I'm unable to go outdoors. He is always at home, hiding, if you want to put it that way. That's a picture of hiding from the public, right? Hiding from the public. So up to this point, you can see that he is now saying, I really did nothing wrong, but it has come to a point where everybody thinks so. And I don't understand why, because I've not done any of the things that I deserve this punishment. We're in the last segment of our study today. It's a long chapter, but it says this: oh, that I had one to hear me, who will grant someone to hear me. That would be a better way of looking at this. He says, this is my desire. This is not my signature. Although in the Hebrew, this is the mark, as a, I guess you could say, my inscription. What I have written to be read or seen, like a mark, right? Like a mark. This is my label. Okay. Let Shaddai answer me, and the indictment which my adversary has written, I would certainly carry it on my shoulder. I would tie it to myself like a garment. So the idea here is, this indictment, this is the case file. So in the mind of Job, he is looking at himself like he's in a courtroom. If I have my opponent, and understand this case, this one adversary does not appear. This would be an opponent. An opponent of law in verse 35. This is a man opposing. So we're talking about a courtroom here, a court case. If I had done wrong, show me. I would certainly carry it on my shoulder and bind it to me in 36. This is not a garland, right? Tie it to myself as crowns. So basically he's saying, I will wear them boldly if I did that. And you can say that it is coming out as, well, maybe somewhat a bit arrogant to say that I am that sure that I am innocent. I would declare to him the number of my steps. Like a prince, I would approach him. If anyone can grant me a hearing, this is what I will do. I will draw close like a prince. I would explain all this. Let's look at the last few verses. If my land cries out against me, its furrows weep together. This is all about the case in opposition. This is a graphic way of expressing, even if his land cries out, his furrows, the little mounds in the tilling of the land, they are bringing a case. If I have eaten its fruit of the land without money, without paying, or I have caused its owners to lose their lives. Now, this is a bit tricky to translate, but you should see that if I have embittered the souls of the owners of the land, right? Nothing to do with losing life, right? This would be embittered. This word is about a blow, is to um, cause trouble to its owners. Then he is saying, if I have done this, then instead of wheat, that would be the way to say it, right? Instead of wheat, may thorns emerge. Okay, these are all the way that he is expressing. In place of wheat, let thorns emerge. Instead of barley, let, I guess you could say, stinking wheat emerge, or some form of bad weeds, right? And then he ends, the words of Job are ended, and he stops his defense. These are a few very graphic defense of what really happened to him, which he still cannot understand, but he is still insistent. And he believes that if he's given a chance to be properly examined, that if he truly have sinned, then he would gladly bear the punishment. And that would be, I guess, the conclusion of these few chapters, that he has vented his own frustrations against his friends, because his friends, like everybody else on the street, feels that he must have done something because he was absolutely righteous and everybody was in fear and at awe with him, and now nobody thinks too much of Job because he is suffering as if he was the guilty party. And Job just cannot come to terms with this. He is absolutely sure, and I think you may detect a little bit of arrogance, that he is prepared to face any courtroom of justice, and he is prepared to be weighed on the scales of justice by God. And so why not? Because he really didn't think he deserved this. And so, with this, we come to the end of our session today.